Hello and welcome to episode 297 of the Clean Energy Show. I'm Brian Stockton.
I'm James Whittingham. This week, India is perhaps 10 years behind China in development, but at similar stages, India is outdoing China in using clean energy to advance its economy. An angry Xi Jinping ordered his entire country to learn cricket in order to get back at India.
A court in the Netherlands has given the government 18 months to set up a legally binding plan to reduce greenhouse gas emissions to net zero by 2050. The case was brought to court by residents of the Dutch-owned island of Bonaire, which may be underwater by 2050. If only they knew someone with advanced knowledge of building dikes.
Electric cars aren't going to drive innovation on solid-state batteries, says TrendForce. It's humanoid robots that currently only last 2 to 4 hours. Brian, am I a humanoid robot? I only last 2 to 4 hours.
Research out of the University of New South Wales suggests that solar panels have the power to heal themselves after sun damage. Cosmetic surgeons around the world immediately called for this knowledge to be shared and turned into a sun damage reversal product that they can sell to humans.
All that, your letters, and the lightning round on this edition of the Clean Energy Show. Oh, I want to warn you that I am on muscle relaxants for my back.
Yeah.
And my brain, which is a muscle that needs relaxing. So if I say anything weird this week, don't cancel your subscription. It's because I'm intoxicated with muscle relaxing medication due to spasms.
Well, next time, please share.
Okay.
Have some enough for the whole podcast next time.
Oh, man, I'd be on them every day if I could. If I don't get an ulcer today sometime, we'll see.
All right, I came across an article in the Globe and Mail newspaper this week, or I came across it online, of course, that I thought was interesting. The headline, "Are adaptive cruise control and lane keeping assist safe to use on winter roads?" And James, what is your answer?
Well, I have experience with adaptive cruise control in my last car, which we had for 5 years, and it was perfectly fine.
Yeah. Well, the answer from this article is that frequently the owner's manual will say, don't use this stuff in the winter, like icy roads are not good.
Really?
Yeah, for cruise control,
right?
Adaptive cruise, because, they're concerned the car just can't control itself. But anyway, I expected there to be some mention maybe of Tesla because I've now been using the full self-driving in the winter, and it's insanely good. Like, it is definitely better than me driving in the winter now.
So you're going to forget how to drive, Brian Stockton?
I'm going to forget how to drive. And,
That's actually going to happen, I think, after a while. You mean you're not getting any younger?
Well, when I do take over, so we're just using it more and more, so the car is driving, and then sometimes whenever I drive, I suddenly get more nervous. So it's already started to happen. I've already started to...
Jesus Christ, really?
Yeah, lose the ability to drive. But in the winter,
wow.
The car, sometimes it'll fishtail a little bit going around a corner. It just corrects itself.
Sure.
It absolutely knows what it's doing. And I just thought it was interesting that the article didn't mention that at all, because it just seems like this is kind of finally happening, and really nobody has any idea that Tesla now sells cars that drive themselves. I would say they're now safer than humans.
And it's winter here. We're in Canada, and we have snow on the roads everywhere. And they don't do a good job of clearing our roads. They don't do a good job of putting paint on our roads to mark it.
Yeah.
And you're telling me that it's working just fine.
It does not matter. And we didn't really use it last winter. I would say not really, usable last winter.
Well, this is quite something, Brian. This is because, I live on a main street, kind of, and it's kind of hairy, even on my main street that gets plowed on a regular basis.
Now, it's not perfect. There are times where if there's enough snowfall where, everything's at the same level, if you can't see the curb because everything is one piece of snow, then the car can't see it either. So it's still not perfect.
What does it do? Does it say, I can't do this? Sorry, drive yourself? Sucker.
Well, it'll do that. If you try and drive in a blizzard, it will work for a while, and then it'll beep at you and tell you to take over. But how
are the sensors, the cameras for being covered in snow and sleet and all that?
That tends to be a problem, especially the back camera. Sometimes you have to get out and wipe it with your thumb, but usually it's good for a journey. You don't have to, stop halfway through the trip and do that. The Tesla cars in Austin, apparently they started adding squirters to all the cameras. So the ones that are working as robotaxis, they have a little squirter for all the cameras. And really, that's what you need to be
necessary.
Yeah. for it to be.
Yeah, I've known that for years that they would have to do that. That's just silly to think otherwise. Because, I mean, if you got schmutz on your glasses, they say if what you can see, the car can see. But if you got schmutz on your glasses, you're not going anywhere.
Yeah.
You're going to pull over.
And then sometimes, depending on the temperature, like the snow can melt on the windshield and there's a camera up top there. So sometimes there can be a little bit of a layer of ice over the camera. And you can sometimes use the wipers to clear that or whatever. But yeah, it just I was quite surprised that there was no mention of that at all in this article. And yeah, I think even most Tesla owners don't use full self-driving. So even Tesla owners don't realize, I think, that it's gotten to this point now. It is definitely safer if the car drives. And like, this should be sort of headline news. There was a lot of Tesla.
Oh, it is here. We're making headlines right now.
On the podcast we are, but Tesla was in the news a lot this week. They're discontinuing the Model S and the Model X. And
I think there's been a lack of trust in Tesla thanks to Musk making false promises for so long. And to think that maybe the day is finally here, maybe our listeners don't believe us, but maybe we need to go for a drive. Maybe we really do. Maybe we need to go for a drive in your car in the winter and see how it does and give a demonstration.
Yeah, well, they don't have a PR department or anything. So, the news isn't necessarily getting out. And like, depending on what headlines you read, like Electrek seems convinced that the self-driving doesn't work, and they keep publishing these headlines that try to convince people that it's not working.
Well, let me ask you this. I think their point of view is that if you deployed robotaxis now with the current technology and didn't have to take over, what would happen? Because you can't have an intervention for, I don't know how many thousands and thousands of miles before you have to have an intervention before it seems like it can be used. My guess here, and this is my prediction, is that Tesla's going to kill somebody. And it's not because I'm criticizing what you're doing.
Yeah.
It's that if you put in tens of thousands of miles a day on robotaxis or something like that, somebody's going to get hurt. I mean, people have got hurt with automation.
Yeah.
And I think that when that happens, though, the people are going to freak out. And I've been saying this for years and years and years. I've been saying this over and over. It's going to be part of the process. It's going to set it back a couple of years, maybe not a couple of years anymore, especially with friends in the White House. But it seems like it was an inevitable setback, like some mistake would happen. And then people are going to say, no, you can't. We're taking back our regulations. You can't operate this without something.
No, we've said that for years on the podcast. I mean, even if it's perfect, somebody could throw themselves in front of the wheels and,
Sure. But even if it is 20 times better than a human driver, that's statistically still a risk there that is, going to be inherent.
So there's an insurance company in the U.S. called Lemonade, and they do car insurance, and they recently announced that if you use Tesla full self-driving, they'll give you as much as a 50% discount on your insurance. And
we've been expecting that for a long time, and it's actually surprising to hear that somebody's actually doing that.
It's finally come, and that's a fairly good indication, I think, that it works, and it's, likely safer than humans already, and, should sort of get better from here.
Yeah, that's the thing, is you can say whatever it is now, whatever it is, if it did hurt somebody, it's only going to get better. And that's true for all self-driving technology. These things are still relatively new and still evolving, and they'll learn from mistakes and get better as they go on. But it's interesting, and our take, if you're new to the show, is that it's been widely thought that electric cars would be, there's a whole bunch of reasons why robotaxis, automated driving, should be electric. And a lot of it has to do with sort of the initial response time. It's not just economics, like if, they'll last 1.5 million miles, some people say, depending on who you talk, to last 2 to 3 times what a gas car would. And so the economics of deploying a fleet in that way would make sense to be electric. But also the instantaneousness of the control is also an issue that I've heard engineers talk about, is that you need that sort of quick response in order to have a good automated driving experience without a human.
Yeah, and the further rollout, like this is still going to be a slow rollout. I presume that like in Austin, they have robotaxis, and presumably they had to really examine the city and examine the mistakes in that city, and then probably tweak the software, and they'll probably have to do that, So it's not going to be quick, but this is starting to roll out, and they do drive themselves.
Well, the Tesla fans say that it is going to be quick because once you can learn and become self-knowing for a driver that you can put it anywhere, at least in America, at least in the United States, where the rules are all the same.
It'll be faster than someone like Waymo because, they can sort of produce as many cars as they want. But yeah, they're still going to have to probably start with human safety monitors in every city, and that's always going to be slow.
So I would say Waymo seems to be the main competition. They've deployed in multiple cities and are charging for fares. Recently, they've deployed to Miami. I don't know how many cities they're in now. Worldwide, it's something like a dozen. I would say that there's other competition that people often don't talk about, and that is, of course, from China.
Yep.
And really what this is not the car itself, it's the software more than anything. And, Waymo is using LiDAR. What did I see LiDAR on the other day? It was on a vacuum cleaner. It was on one of those robot vacuums had LiDAR. Like, you can't tell me that LiDAR is too expensive, Elon, because if you could put it on a Roomba, then why can't you put it on a car where it's much more important? Personally, I like to see LiDAR in cars, but that's another issue. What do you think? Musk has said we're not going to sell cars anymore. Don't worry about their car numbers. We're a robotaxi company. We're an AI company. Do you buy into that? I don't. I don't think that because I think there's other people that can do it just as well. They might be 6 months behind. They might be, you could say they're years behind, but they will eventually catch up, and there will be competition, and it will be cutthroat. And how much money are you really going to make off of a robotaxi service?
Well, they're going to start production of those official robotaxis sometime this year. They're going to make that 2-seater robotaxi. They'll be able to make them for about $30,000 each. I don't think anyone's close to doing that, going into production on a dedicated robotaxi. So I think they're at least a couple years ahead.
Well, there's the Amazon company has a sort of a minivan without a steering wheel. I don't know how many of them they're making. Waymo is buying other people's cars. They used to use the Jaguar I-Pace, and now they're using Hyundai Ioniq 5s. And we just talked about it recently. I can't remember which was the other one, but there's other people, they're just putting their hardware on regular cars. But it is something that sort of is intrusive. There's LiDARs in all four corners of it, and there's something on the roof, and then you can tell what it is from a mile away. I don't want to pretend to predict, but, 5 years ago, Tesla was saying that they were going to deliver 20 million EVs a year by 2030, and that would be 25% of the entire auto market. And you know what? I probably believe them, or mostly believed them back then. I don't now, but now that plan is out the window, right? We're going to be an AI company, and we're going to make money off of transportation as a service.
When they said that, they probably weren't thinking of autonomous cars. Like, that was sort of before their autonomous plans really fully formed. So they could definitely make a few million of these robotaxi things a year, and I would expect them to do that because, like I say, it works. There's nothing. There's at this point, there's no real huge bottleneck.
Okay, so I think we should. You're going to Toronto for a while, for a weekend or so.
Yeah.
I think we should. After that, make plans before winter goes away.
Yeah.
Who knows with global warming when winter will suddenly cease around here, but I think we should go for a drive. I think we should record that with your, I don't know what format, IMAX? What do you roll on these days?
Yeah.
Like a pretty big format camera.
Yeah.
And show our listeners and me how impressive this software is. Because we've done some tests before that weren't necessarily fully impressive, but driving around in the winter, I think sure would be, especially, after a fairly recent snowfall. Not a huge dump like you get in New Jersey, but like a few centimeters to dust everything up and then have a ride would be cool. I got a warning light in my Chevy Bolt again. It's less than 3 years old, so it's under warranty. The batteries on all electric cars, by the way, are 8 years in North America. It's by law. So that's, anything to do with your electric system is under warranty. But I was pissed off that I had a warning light. I thought, okay, Chevy, my rear door button on the hatch stopped working. It had to be replaced under warranty. I'm not used to this. With two Toyotas that were bought or leased new and then bought out, I had nothing, zero, for 5 years of each car. So I'm not happy about that. And I'm thinking, okay, I was uneasy going to the Chevy brand, but I started looking at the Toyota BZ forums, and they are BZ now. They're just BZ in Canada. BZ4X is what they called them. Inexplicably, like they didn't want to sell vehicles. Let's name it the stupidest name we can think of. And next to the Cybertruck, it's got a bad reputation for naming. And yeah, there's a lot of unhappy people in the BZ forums. And other times, there's a lot of happy people in the BZ forums. So I had to parse that. I had to decide, what's really going on here. And I think there's just a lot of people who did zero research going into an electric car. Zero. They had no idea that you would lose range, that you wouldn't have that 24/7, 365 days a year.
Yeah.
Exactly what it says. That's how far it can go. That's what it'll do. And it doesn't matter if there's snow or if there's cold weather. And I think they just weren't prepared for that, and they're very angry at Toyota for making a crap vehicle. But that said, there were some problems with the first generation, which I think covered 2 years, and now they've improved it a lot. And also, I went searching for electric cars, and there was a pretty reasonably priced brand new BZ in Saskatoon, a couple of hours away, that I could technically buy for like 1% or 2% interest. Without, it would require a federal program to come back to give a discount. But, it seemed not entirely impossible. However, it's a lower range car. It's only 380 kilometers, but it does charge twice as fast as my car. So it seems like an option. Although, the problem with buying electric cars is that they are like computers in the early days, getting better every couple of years. So, and then that's not so much where we live, but in the United States, it can really affect resale value. And that's one thing. Another thing that people are pissed off about is the horrible resale value, because the cars are improving. Like if I went to buy a Toyota EV, I would want the newest generation, not the old one, because it's got more range and it charges faster and it heats the battery better and things like that. So I don't know. That's my thought. There was another EV fire in the news. This is in the UK. It was a Peugeot EV. And, somebody pointed out all these news articles that were written about it, and it was wrong. They blamed it on the EV battery fire, and it wasn't the EV battery. It was under the hood somewhere, like the 12-volt system. But no one's going to read the follow-up. We've talked about this in recent weeks. No one reads the follow-up. They get the bad news. My kid's teacher got the bad news. There is no EV fire in our city in electric buses, and it's frustrating. But we're here to fight that, and we know that the technology is not going to be stopped by misinformation. It's just it's too good.
Yeah. All right, moving on to the Netherlands. This story is from the CBC. A court on Wednesday ordered the Dutch government to drop a plan to protect residents of the tiny Caribbean island of Bonaire from the devastating effect of climate change. So this is a big victory for the island. We love climate lawsuits here on the Clean Energy Show. Sometimes they work, sometimes they don't. This island, it's in the Caribbean, but it's owned by the Dutch. This was a thing I didn't really know about. It says here in the article that this, along with 2 other islands, became special Dutch municipalities in 2010, so not even that long ago. And there's 20,000 residents who are Dutch citizens based on their colonial history and these recent rulings. And they're experiencing extreme weather in these islands. So they brought a lawsuit against the Dutch government, and in a stunning rebuke of the Dutch authorities, the court ruled that the government discriminated against the island's 20,000 inhabitants by not taking timely and appropriate measures to protect them from climate change before it's too late. The island already suffers from flooding due to tropical storms and extreme rainfall. And according to researchers, this is going to get worse, and we know that. Even conservative forecasts predict that parts of the island will be underwater by 2050, and that is just in 25 years. Like, that is not that far away.
That is not long.
Yeah, so...
that's 24 years, I'll correct you on
technically,
that.
yes.
We have to remember that the time is ticking here, because that's incredible. That reminds me of Greenland, which only has like 54,000 residents or something. This is like half that, less than half that, but the courts have stood up for them.
Yeah.
Maybe Florida should sue somebody. I don't see that happening, but they're sinking too. They're getting flooding there.
No, they're having similar issues. So the court gave them 18 months to set up a legally binding plan because, of course, lots of governments have plans to reduce their greenhouse gas emissions, but quite often they are not legally binding. Well, this calls for a legally binding plan to reduce greenhouse gas emissions to net zero by 2050. Greenpeace helped them out in this lawsuit. And it's, the court said that the government in the Netherlands just wasn't moving fast enough and they had certain targets, but none of them are legally binding. So now they have to be legally binding. This is a big deal.
It is a big deal. And other countries, it's always a big deal when a climate lawsuit succeeds because it spurs other lawsuits and sets some sort of precedent and if nothing else, it's inspiration to continue litigation on this matter.
Yeah, and they don't always work. And of course, one failed around here. Some friends of the podcast working on that lawsuit that was unfortunately not successful in trying to shut down the coal plants that our government wants to keep running forever and ever. But anyway, overall, a great good news climate story.
It is. And Brian, India is doing better than China at the stage of their development. I've, throughout the 6 years of this podcast, coming up on 6 years, I've often wondered about India. Yeah. China, we talked about from the get-go, was doing big things in decarbonization. They had a lot of pollution. India's got more pollution in their cities, but it's not all from electricity generation or car burning, but it is from other things too. And they are doing better. And I kind of always had this thought that India is just not going to do as well as China. But the truth is not quite like that at all. India doesn't have much in the way of fossil fuel reserves. So what happens when you have a democratized source of energy like clean energy, solar and wind, and batteries? You can do a lot more things. China has some fossil fuels, but they import a lot too. So it's very geopolitically sensitive these days to import fuels and not knowing where you're getting them from. So they've been, they were getting some from South America, but that got cut off. So there is 1.5 billion people in India this year. It's the largest populous country in the world now. 53 people are born every minute in India. So 53 people were born since I started yammering about this.
Wow.
Already. And China's population is declining, partially due to the one-child policy that is no longer in effect, but that has become an issue there. So a new report from the energy think tank Ember finds that India is electrifying its economy faster and using far fewer fossil fuels than China did at a similar point in its development. And a lot of people are thinking that the similar point that India's at was where China was about 10 years ago or so.
Yeah.
So as far as, getting everyone into the middle class and, getting that economy taking off, they're both developing countries at one point. So when we say similar stage, we're not talking about the same year, the same size economy, but both countries reached the comparable income levels generally for the population and industrial growth. The moment when energy demand really starts to surge as people buy more appliances, they buy cars and manufactured goods. So the economy starts taking off in that way once you give people money. And on that stage, China was relying heavily on coal and oil to fuel its growth. But India, by contrast, is using only a fraction of those fossil fuels per person on a per capita basis. The key difference is timing because India has access to cheap solar power now and electric vehicles that weren't affordable or widely available when China was industrializing a decade ago. And the report suggests that this could signal a major shift for other developing countries too, other developing economies around the world, that this is not going to necessarily take place. Like, I remember the former premier of Alberta, the oil province in Canada, saying that, oil demand is going to go on forever. They're not going to be driving Teslas in India. And I got angry, as I do. And I said, you're full of crap. And this proves it. This proves it that they're not going to be driving Teslas, but some of them will. And some of them will be driving Chinese EVs, and many of them will be driving India-made EVs because they're not that hard to manufacture. Instead of following the traditional path of building first with fossil fuels, countries like India seem to be leaping forward straight to electricity powered by clean energy. And Ember calls these countries electrostates, economies that can meet most of their energy needs with affordable domestically produced electricity. strengthening energy security. You don't have to you don't have to import things from Russia. And that's been in the news this week, that Trump has got India to agree to not buy oil from Russia, which makes me happy because I don't like Russia. And they fuel, what is it? 40% of their GDP is oil. So yeah, Putin's war machine gets kicked in the ass if you take away his oil sales, which they've been greasily doing behind the scenes. So the orthodox narrative that emerging markets must follow the same path as the West and China took, which is basically biomass to fossil fuels, said Kingsmill Bond, a strategist at Ember, and one of the authors of the report, said that's not going to happen. Ember's analysis adjusted China's and India's gross domestic product for the cost of living, put India's income per person at about $11,000 US, the same level as China was in 2012, a little more than 10 years ago. But that 11,000 gets you a lot more in China than it does in North America and other places in the world.
Yeah.
So that allowed the report's authors to compare the two economies' energy systems at a similar development. The Indian economy's coal and oil consumption per capita is a fraction of what China's was at a similar income level when they reached similar income levels 10 years ago plus. So in absolute terms, India's fossil fuel consumption is growing at a slower rate than China's is today. And cheaper panels allow India to reach 5% penetration of solar in the power mix at a much lower levels of economic development. And that would be true for all developing countries. In India, 5% of all new car sales in 2024 were electric. That's where Canada was just a couple of years ago, for example, in the United States. The country's per capita consumption of oil for road transportation is 60% lower than when China hit that milestone. That is pretty significant. And as a result, Bond says that India's peak road oil consumption per person will likely never reach Chinese levels, even though they are now a larger country and taking off economically.
Yeah, GDP used to be tied to how much oil you used, but that is no longer necessary. At one point, that was the only way to grow your GDP, was to buy more oil, and just simply not the case anymore. All right, from Renew Economy, solar panels, heal thyself. This is an article about some research.
Is this a religious thing, Brian? Is this evangelical thing?
Yes. The cult of solar panels.
Devil be gone?
Yeah, so the University of New South Wales in Australia has done some research that reveals that solar panels can heal themselves. And I will not pretend...
Existing solar panels that are out there right now are healing themselves.
Yes, and
without religious intervention.
Pretend to fully understand this, but we know that solar panels degrade over time. They don't produce as much peak power. We also know that sometimes the power comes back, and they've never understood why. That
really
the sort of output capability can sort of rise and fall. And well, they essentially invented a new type of camera that doesn't just measure how much power the cell produces, but it can directly see how the material itself is changing in real time. So it says, normally we can only measure the power output that has been observed already by many people, but with this new method, we're also explaining the mechanism, and we can see the change at a material level. So using a ultraviolet Raman spectroscopy, which uses lasers to scatter light and reveal a material's molecular vibrations, this allowed the authors of the study to see what is happening in real time without having to physically shred the panel or rely on just electrical output readings. So this helps them distinguish between true long-term degradation and reversible changes. So some of these changes are reversible, and it comes from the UV light. The UV light can damage the panels just like it can damage your skin. But your skin doesn't automatically heal itself, but the panels apparently do. That regular sunlight then, as opposed to the UV, the regular sunlight has a replenishing effect on the panels. And
is there anything the sun can't do?
Yeah, the sun is amazing. So there's a thing called hydrogen bonding with the silicon on the panels. And so what this research now suggests is that you may need fewer materials in the panels. Like, they used to think they needed a certain amount of protective layers to protect from this UV. But once they understand which parts of the damage can fix themselves, then maybe you can actually reduce the materials that are needed in the panel and make cheaper solar panels.
Well, that's fascinating. So solar panels could get even cheaper.
Yeah, yet another. I mean, they're already plummeting in price, but here's a possibility to make them even cheaper.
Well, that's a very interesting story. I had no idea. And that's their theories as to why it seems to be healing themselves. Like, I know my solar production goes up and down, but you always blame that on climate. It's hard to know how much sun is hitting the panels at any time.
Yeah, so it could be that if there's too much UV radiation at a certain point, that damages your panels, and then they repair themselves. I don't understand this, James. I can't pretend to understand.
I understand that you don't understand. I don't understand it, but I understand that you don't understand, and I don't understand. But some things we talk about on the show are over our head, but not when we dip into the mailbag. Let's do that right now. We have a letter here from, where is this? This is from Ruben, I think. This is Ruben in Ventura, California. I am that same guy that claimed corn is a grain. But here's something really important, he writes. This is back from when the U.S. Supreme Court was honorable and heard cases of great merit without political bias and favoritism to the King of America. 1893, cucumbers and tomatoes were deemed by the U.S. Supreme Court as fruit. And that settles it for me, he says. Congress passed the Tariff Act in 1883, which imposed a 10% tax on vegetables, but not fruits. So you classified everything as a fruit then, I guess. In 1886, the next family who were in the tomato selling business tried to declare their juicy red goods as fruits at the New York port to avoid paying the tariff. However, port collector Edward L. Hedden disagreed and still charged them with a 10% tax. The disagreement led to the Nexus suing Hedden the following year. After 6 years of a legal battle, the Supreme Court Justice Horace Gray finally legally declared tomatoes, and by proxy cucumbers, as vegetables in 1893. Although the judge agreed that tomatoes are botanically fruits, just as are cucumbers, squashes, beans, and peas, he concluded in his decision a statement that they're all vegetables. Okay. He further described them as usually served at dinner in, with, or after the soup, fish, or meats, which constitutes the principle of the repast and not, like fruits generally, as dessert, which is pretty much identical to how the culinary world used them. And he has left us a link here. Tastingtable.com is the link, and are cucumbers fruit or vegetables explained.
Yeah.
So this has been a debate on the show. It's just come up under the radar, but that's what's happened. And yeah.
Yeah, and it's not always science that decides these things, but sometimes it's legal things that decide these things.
Yeah, it's just like words in the dictionary. If you use them, then they become words.
Yeah.
Sorry.
All right. If you'd like to contact us about anything at all, cleanenergyshow@gmail.com, and you can always leave us a voicemail online at speakpipe.com/cleanenergyshow.
And as you guys know, the Clean Energy Show podcast is an independent podcast made possible by listeners who support us on our Patreon page. So we would be very happy if you visited patreon.com/cleanenergypod and support this podcast for as little as $1 a month. If you don't want to do that, you can do it on PayPal. The link is in your show notes. You can make a one-time donation. If you win the lottery, send us a few bucks and leave it at that if you want. You also get perks when you do that, though, like verbal shout-outs on our audio podcast, which we're doing this week, because it's the first of the month. Everyone in our Clean Club or higher tiers get a verbal shout-out. So Clean Club executive members Brent Routley and Green Bastard, Clean Club Plus members Wes S., John Hayes, and Bob Armstrong, and we'll get to the rest of you later in the show in just a few minutes. But I'd also want to put a thank you to our supporter levels who don't get the shout-outs, but they do give us money every month. You guys mean a lot to us. You make this, well, very good show to do because you support us and we keep going. Coming up soon, it's the lightning round. Time for the lightning round.
The lightning round is a fast-paced look at the latest headlines in climate, clean energy and transportation.
A row of homes in a village in South Wales is to be bought by a local authority and demolished as they can no longer be protected from flooding caused by the climate crisis. And it will cost the local council more than £2.5 million to to buy the 16 riverside properties, pay for legal costs, and help to rehouse dozens of residents. And this is an ongoing thing. And of course, it gets worse from here, Brian.
Yeah, that is very unfortunate.
UN countries are discussing new global tax rules that could make fossil fuel companies and the ultra-rich, that's not me, help pay for climate change. Many developing nations say the plans have been weakened and don't go far enough. Supporters argue stronger taxes are urgently needed to fund climate recovery, reduce inequality, and ensure the biggest polluters and wealthiest people pay their fair share. Not positive about that happening, but it's a good try, I guess. Hopefully something happens, but the rich will never pay their fair share. They'll go to the moon if they have to. Because you know what I've learned? I didn't come to this conclusion myself, that the ultra-rich, they want to be more ultra-rich. They're in competition with each other. You know? It's not good enough to just be really rich, have everything you need. They want to outdo their schmo friends. Last year, extreme Canadian wildfires drove aerosol levels around 30% above normal, sharply reducing solar irradiance across Canada and even impacting Europe solar electricity productions. So irradiance is the amount of solar potential that comes down from the sun at any time. It can be obscured by pollution or clouds or, haze.
And we had frequently smoky days last summer and the summer before and the summer before that, and it impacts the solar production that we have on our solar panels as well as
our solar production. You and me are examples of that,
as well as reducing our lung capacity by making it hard to breathe.
And that was affected in Europe. I mean, we heard from a listener that I went all the way to Europe and into the Alps, I believe, or Switzerland, and it's just. It's incredible, and it only gets worse from here. I don't know that this, summer, spoiler alert, it could be worse because, I think the Rocky Mountains in BC just got a dump of precipitation, but it's really not enough, and we haven't got much precipitation here. We got a little bit, but it's just not enough to combat climate change. And when that stuff melts really quickly, like when it goes from frozen to like 30-degree hot summer weather in a day or two, then it just runs off and doesn't soak in, and if things go up in flames. So I don't think we're ready for it. And I don't think anything has happened to make those wildfires any better this year. I don't think a whole lot of money has gone into mitigation. CATL is the world's biggest battery maker. They're in China, announced its next generation battery will retain 80% of its capacity after 3,000 full discharge cycles. They just announced this a few days ago. And that translates into an expected battery life of more than 1.8 million kilometers or 1.1 million miles if you're looking at EVs. And of course, that is maybe okay for a robotaxi. That's more than what most people will own their car for. So it's crazy.
Yeah.
These batteries... I also looked at the Nissan Leaf forums, and, those batteries don't do well. Like, they're still not doing well. Even the ones from a few years ago are not doing well. Huh. Like, that shouldn't be the case. They should, because Nissan Leaf is another relatively cheap car that you can get, and it checks a lot of boxes, but I don't know if I have faith in their battery chemistry. Oh, it's time for a CES Fast Fact. There are 30,000 fewer jobs in the Canadian oil industry than there was 10 years ago. Yeah, and the oil industry says, jobs, jobs, jobs. We have to burn the planet for jobs. But there's 30,000 fewer in Canada, which is a smaller country population-wise in some places. And you can find that story in the Toronto Star.
Yeah, that's a lot over a 10-year period to lose 30,000 jobs. That's a big deal.
And that trend is continuing. It has to do with efficiencies and automation and things like that. 2 Colorado electric co-ops are the first utilities to challenge the Trump administration's campaign to force coal plants to stay open. You may have heard that in the news a lot. We haven't talked about it much of the show, but Trump is trying to force coal plants to stay open. It's such an absurd notion. They argue that the Department of Energy's must-run order for Craig Unit 1 in Colorado imposes unreasonable costs on their members and could force cheaper solar to go offline. It's insane. Yeah. It's absolutely insane. It makes no sense to do this other than for petty grievances with your foes who like solar.
Yeah.
Supposedly.
And it's easier to switch off the solar than it is to switch off the coal. It's not a up and down kind of power source where you can just shut it off in a blink of an eye if you need to.
Yes, because it is thermal. They're boiling water and running turbines. China bans all, this is interesting, Brian, this is breaking news as of Tuesday when we're recording this. China has banned all retractable car door handles starting next year. That includes your Teslas, who are manufactured in China, and who, I believe, was it Tesla that started this trend? It seems like it was. Maybe there was some luxury car that also did it, but a lot of people are doing it now. In fact, I think the Nissan Leaf I just talked about, the new one of those, has a retractable handle. And it is an aesthetic thing. It's also a bit aerodynamic. You want your electric cars to have as many advantages aerodynamically as they can. But there are safety downsides, and Tesla's handles are an extreme example. In the event of a crash and the loss of the 12-volt power, that's the power from the little battery that powers your radio and your locks and your windows, there is no way for first responders to open the door from the outside, and that has supposedly resulted in at least 15 deaths. I don't know, everybody seems to be doing that in China. Almost everybody is making retractable handles. That seems to be the thing, and now China has banned it.
Yeah, then there's two kinds. There's sort of the mechanical one, like the Tesla Model Y, where you just push it in and it flips out. And there's the kind that have a motor. The motor one's more convenient because it just pops out when you walk up to the car, but yeah,
it senses your key and then puts it out for you. Here you go, Brian, open me.
But if it loses power, that's definitely an issue.
Yeah, there's been some scary examples of that. But it is interesting that the Chinese government felt that they need to move forward on that. And they've only given their manufacturers a year. That's not much time in auto manufacturing to change things up at all. Speaking of China, China's solar generating capacity is expected to surpass coal for the first time this year, according to the country's top electricity industry group. That's from Bloomberg. So they're going to surpass coal. Everybody around here says China, they burn coal. That's all they do is burn coal. And now solar is bigger than coal. And that's the way it should be where you and I live. But no, they're just brain surgeons. Telsa has set a new solar generation record in February. This is a day record that is done not only February, but the first day of February. Solar provided most of the grid power in Texas for February 1st, 2026.
Amazing.
Solar in February. Imagine what it could do in summer. In 1 year, Chinese auto brands went from a less than 5% market share in Europe to nearly 10%. That's 10% of new passenger car sales by volume in Europe now are 10% are Chinese. That's a big leap, even though the Chinese would like to sell a lot more cars than they are. Full electric, that's battery BEVs, or battery electric vehicles, the sales in Turkey skyrocketed 80% in 2025 over the year before. Diesel car sales are down 40% in Turkey, and gasoline cars are down 70% since 2023. Battery electric vehicles market share jumped from 10% in 24 to 17%. That's a big jump in 1 year. And Turkey, of all places, is going electric. And you know what? Sometimes it's surprising what places go electric, and we're not going electric here. But a lot of places are. Morgan Stanley expects China's sales of humanoid robots to rise exponentially to 262,000 units a year by 2030 and 2.6 million per year by 2035. Maybe that's the time when I get one, Brian. And it will carry me around town. I won't need a car. Because I think it would be hilarious to be carried around by a robot. Has to be a robust robot, but I don't know what I would call them. It was just 12,000 last year. But you know what? There was 12,000 humanoid robots made last year.
I had no idea. I had no idea. I thought it was maybe a few dozen for sort of testing purposes.
This is a thing. You know what? The software is a way out. You know, I've said before that the technology for the mechanics is all there. Well, they're improving that a lot. And when they improve that a lot of things happen with improvements with efficiency and so forth.
Yes, but the software will be difficult, absolutely. So it's not going to happen overnight, but it's definitely going to happen.
Well, one day you might hear from somebody that the humanoid robot is suddenly there. You're telling me that the Tesla self-driving is suddenly there.
Yep.
May sneak up on you. May sneak up on me. From Jonathan Chang, the Wall Street Journal opinion columnist, he says, I test drove a Chinese EV. Now I don't want to buy American cars anymore. This is the Wall Street Journal. Amazing battery range, customizable interiors, and sleek software. The columnist fell in love with a Xiaomi SU7 Max after driving it for weeks. And you can read that story in the Wall Street Journal. That's been making a lot of stink on the internet this week. And finally this week, we think of EVs as being a driver of solid-state battery development. Solid-state batteries is the holy grail of batteries. Been trying to make these for a long time. There's been promises made, promises broken, startups making promises. The thing is, there's a lot of, they're safer. There's a lot of energy in a smaller space, so it would do a lot more things. And a new report is saying that it's not electric cars that are going to drive the advancement of these solid-state batteries. It's actually humanoid robots. Again with the humanoid robots.
Yeah.
I want one. 1,500 times growth by 2035 of the humanoid robots, and that's 700% a year growth of your humanoid friends. Lithium iron phosphate, or LFP batteries, that's the common batteries used for low and medium range EVs, being more affordable, are mainly used in service robots right now that do not require high endurance. It's just weird to talk about this like this is going on.
Yeah.
But it is. It is actually going on, especially in China.
Well, we used to talk about it in terms of aviation and because you need better, higher density batteries if you're ever going to have electric aviation. But I suppose humanoid robots have similar kind of things because you don't want them to be gigantic and carrying around thousands of, pounds worth of batteries. So you're going to need them to be as dense and as good as possible. Otherwise, you're just charging it every couple hours.
So right now, if you got a robot working in a factory, you can have a 24-hour runtime, but they swap their own batteries.
Yeah.
Unplug one and stick it in another, and they do that. And two companies are taking that approach currently. Some robot makers are already employing solid-state batteries that get over 4 hours of human action, supposedly. Although we see solid-state batteries happening, but it's hard to believe, there's not any direct evidence out there yet that these things actually exist. But supposedly, we'll keep an eye on it. Humanoid robot batteries have lagged because the robots themselves are still evolving. So you don't develop the battery so fast as the humanoid robots are evolving. That makes it hard to design a battery that fits their changing shapes and power needs. We're talking about robots. It's so weird. And I'm on, muscle relaxant, so maybe that's enhancing it slightly, but I find it quite weird to talk about this. And since humanoid robots are just entering the market, companies are focused more on finding useful jobs for them than extending their battery life. But even so, humanoid robots could be ideally early users of solid-state batteries because these batteries offer higher energy density and better safety. You don't want your robot combusting. It would be kind of creepy. And as those batteries are proving it cheaper, they could help solve robots' biggest power and endurance challenges. All hail our robot overlords, Brian.
And on that note, that's our show for this week. You can find us on social media at Clean Energy Pod. That Patreon is patreon.com/cleanenergypod. The email is cleanenergyshow@gmail.com. And please remember to hit that subscribe or follow button on your podcast app, and then you'll get us delivered every week.
We really appreciate it if you hit us up at patreon.com/cleanenergypod like our many Clean Club members do, and they get a shout out verbally every month. Going to do it in reverse alphabetical order just to mix things up if you don't mind. Richard W., Landon U., Joe Thorsheim, Arthur Slade, Robu, Walden Penner, Peter O'Donnell, Timo Kellenberger, Sean Hines, H., Roshan Gervais, Andy Fessler, Sean Ennis, Josh Engen, Bob Eaton, Jonathan Dick, Denny and Linda, Nick Cook. I am totally on drugs. Noah Cook. It had to be this week that I was on muscle relaxants when I had to read the Patreon names. Thank you to all for supporting our podcast. It would mean a lot if you joined our Patreon. Please consider giving us a review if you don't want to do that on your favorite podcast app. Give us a 5-star review. We'll see you again in 7 days. Our bonus podcast coming up in a few.
Yeah, look for the bonus in a few days, and we'll see you next week.